we got to talk about Patrick Mahomes because Chiefs are 2-0. A thrilling victory against the Cincinnati Bengals. Well, thrilling depending on whose side you were on watching that game. If you were Bengals side, it probably wasn't so thrilling. But Seth, it feels like business as usual to start the season for Kansas City. But it feels like it's more difficult this year. And I don't know if that's something that has been present for the last couple of years, if we've sort of been building up to this point. But Kansas City feels like their defense is playing really, really well. But it genuinely feels like their offense is sort of vulnerable, or maybe the more vulnerable side of the ball is the better way to say it, when it comes to them actually completing this three-peat. So when you're watching Mahomes, am I overthinking here? Do you see something in sort of what is going on with that offense? And is it still one of the most potent offenses in the league? Or what do you think when you watch Kansas City?
As a whole, the offense is kind of mid, and it's only mid because they have, one of the five best quarterbacks of all time there. Because I don't know if this offense really works with many other quarterbacks of all time, right? Not necessarily just in the league right now, but of all time. When you go back and you think about how this offense has evolved in terms of the personnel, and this is not any knock on Mahomes, who I just called one of the five best quarterbacks of all time, but when you come into the league and you're playing with two Hall of Famers in their peak, Tyreek Hill, Travis Kelce. You're playing with real NFL offensive tackles in Schwartz and Fisher at the time, and then of course you have Andy Reid as a head coach, another future Hall of Famer. So when you have that level of surrounding talent, and you add a Patrick Mahomes and his level of talent, you get these top offenses. And now you don't have Tyreek anymore. The tackle play has gotten tremendously bad. I mean, really, really bad. They have to bench their tackle in the middle of last game.
Right.
And then it wasn't good last year either with Donovan Smith and Jawan Taylor. So, and look, at the end of the day, Travis Kelce's not in his prime anymore. That's just a fact. It comes for everybody. It was eventually going to come for Kelce. It took a while because of his talent level, that it took him till his mid-30s for it to kind of fall off like this. But maybe it's just a regular season thing. Like we saw him in the playoffs last year, come out of kind of retirement in the playoffs last year and have a great run. But I think this offense has changed so much, and I think they're kind of still trying to find their ways schematically and how to make it work. We saw that the Rashee Rice touchdown down the sideline, I think was his first 40-yard touchdown pass in a long time. Like that was not we know that that's not what the Chiefs were built on a few years ago. It's changed. It's a lower average depth of target, but the crazy thing is it's still a very high average time to throw for Mahomes. So he's not feeling right in terms of the play design. He doesn't love what he's seeing in terms of our guys open during the kind of structure of the play. And then he's coming out of the pocket and he's making really good plays out of the pocket. He always will, but they're not necessarily down the field plays as much that we saw early in the career. So it's so again, I go back to what would this offense look like without a guy who can make pass rushers miss in the way that no one has ever done before in the history of the game, like Patrick Mahomes does. I don't think I've ever seen a guy make his pocket escapability is top of all time, probably. So what does this offense look like? And I just want Andy to call a more simple game. And you see it sometimes. You saw it in the Baltimore game on some easy stuff they got Rashee Rice into. That led to some catch and runs, isolate a linebacker. But at the end of the day, it's a lot of crossing routes that lead to nowhere. It makes me a little mad because I think it's not fair that we don't get to watch the high flying Chiefs offense anymore. I'm mad personally that I don't get to watch them score 30 points a game anymore.
How much do you think is on sort of what defenses are doing around the NFL in general, right? Because I think it's not just a Chiefs problem, if you will, if you even want to call it that, with them being 2-0. We're seeing around the league, I think that through 2 weeks in the season, like, we have less explosive plays than we had at any point over the last 5 seasons. It's less points scored, it's less passing yards, and so it feels as though, we say this all the time, the NFL and just the game of football, it's very cyclical. Offense will have the advantage and the defense will get the advantage when they sort of counterpunch, and then the offense will sort of figure out ways to get back to it. And I think that we're sort of in the midst of a big shift back towards defenses being able to have an upper hand on what offenses are doing. And I think a lot of people look at the rise of playing at least two guys in deep coverage, or we see like a lot of quarter halves, and we see a lot of different, creativity when it comes to cover 3, having 3 guys deep, or at least 2 guys dedicated to being deep. How much of it would you say that goes into it? Because you got to think, defenses probably started shifting, if you will, because of Mahomes. So I feel like if there was any time in which defenses would kind of throw something new out there, or throw more deep coverage players or whatever, it would have started probably like 2 or 3 seasons ago, and it would have started with Kansas City. So I think maybe this decline of the explosiveness of what we have seen the Chiefs be capable of over the first, say, like 3 or 4 years of Mahomes' career, it could have something to do with that. Do you think that is a big piece of the pie, or are the Chiefs still making things overly complicated beyond just what defenses are trying to do to counter them and limit those explosive plays from them?
Well, I think it's both, but I think, relatively, like, I would probably imagine that the Chiefs seem more dedicated to high coverages than most other teams. But that's, to me, it's still not yet an excuse, because there's things you can do. Like, I know that everyone talks about this as like the ruination of football, like 2 high defenses and stuff, and we're not getting explosive plays. But like, if you're playing with 2 high safeties, you're playing with 1 less underneath defender.
Mm-hmm.
You're playing with a lighter box. Like, so there's things you can do, and I don't know if the Chiefs are necessarily doing all those things. I think a lot of that is, what they were able to do back in the day was put Travis Kelce as an isolated receiver, as a kind of call it like a Y ISO, being the single receiver onto one side of the field, and that would change a lot of what a defense could do. If you played too high against that, then they would just eat you alive with Travis Kelce underneath.
Mm-hmm.
And what's happening now is, I mean, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I believe I only saw it maybe once against the Bengals, and it was actually the play where Mahomes threw an interception, and it got called back because Travis Kelce was getting held on the play. But the point is, like, they don't have this device to really get the ball underneath quickly, because Kelce can't really play on the line of scrimmage anymore. They have to use him off the line of scrimmage a lot. They can't use him as isolated scenarios, because that's where he gets pressed. And he's just not that type of player anymore. Again, like, we're talking about a 34, 35-year-old man here. Like for him to have done it all this time is a testament to him and why he's going to be in the Hall of Fame.
Mm-hmm.
But it's tougher now to get off of press when he's on the line of scrimmage, when he's the isolated receiver. And when you look at Mahomes throwing to Kelce under 2.3 seconds, so really quick in the play, he's basically top 2 every year as for tight ends in his first few years with Mahomes, top 15 in the league regardless of position, and it's fallen to very low numbers, right? 20 in the 20s last year, the amount of targets he got under 2.3 seconds. This year he's 97th with only 3 targets. So they can't get the ball in his hands quickly. And then you get into a situation where obviously the pass rush with the 2 tackles trying to protect Mahomes is not good. So you get later in the down, and it's tougher for them to make plays like that. Like, I know we always talk about like how good they were at those kind of second reaction plays. They are, But those didn't make up a big chunk of the offense. It never did. What made up a big chunk in the offense was getting Tyreek Hill down the field quickly, getting Travis Kelce in these like super favorable matchups underneath, and getting the ball out quicker when they were able to get the ball out quicker. They're just not able to get the ball out quick. Mahomes has to keep the ball. I would just love to see him in some of these like other offenses. I think about the Ravens. You know what the Ravens do with Todd Monken the past 2 years or a year and 2 games is keep it separate, keep the passing concepts separate. You get a passing concept on your left, you get a passing concept on your right, and you're going to work one side or the other. And Lamar makes a decision pre-snap, throws it. And I would love to see kind of more of that. I think there's, like I've said before, it's like kind of too many crossing routes, like there's too much full field stuff that I don't think is really working right now. I will say the one thing that they have going for them that they didn't have last year, and of course last year they won the Super Bowl, but they still were really bad at running the football. I mean, like tremendously bad at running the football. And you need to be a lot better at running the football if you're getting all these too high coverages, light boxes. They're better so far this year. They had the fumble, which kind of skews the numbers, but in terms of like success rate, I think they're about 48% this year, which is really good. You'd love to be around 50, especially with all the too high boxes they are, but a lot better than 32% last year. So if the running game stays on track, then hopefully they can build off this. But it's been a struggle for about a year and a half now, and I don't know where the answers are.
Obviously, I agree with you. I think that as defenses are allocating more resources to high shell coverages, then you should be able to run the ball. Like you should be able to run the ball a little bit better, which running the ball is easier, right? I mean, you don't have to hold on to it. The guys don't have to pass protect. You don't have to have the timing. The ball doesn't have to leave your hand in order to get to exactly where it needs to go. You just hike the ball, you hand it off to the running back, the offensive line, they push forward as a unit, and that's that. And I think that we have seen some teams lean into that. I look at what the Los Angeles Rams did a lot last year, where they went from, okay, we are primarily a mid-zone, outside zone type of a running team, but we've got, all these great passing concepts and passing weapons, and we got Matthew Stafford and all that good stuff. And I think Sean McVay saw where the league was going. He was like, all right, you want to play too high on us? We're going to run power. We're going to run it between the tackles, and we're just going to hand the ball off. And they had, I think, a good amount of success there, and they leaned more into that as they drafted certain players and prioritized certain players. So, yeah, I think that that's sort of where it's going. Go ahead. You want to say something?
No, it's a really good point because there's similarities there with the Chiefs, because the Chiefs throughout the regular season last year had continued to run their kind of outside zone scheme, which they had done a lot. I mean, that was kind of their main thing. A little different than the Rams because they were in shotgun than the Rams being under center. But what was happening was those two tackles, Donovan Smith and Juwan Taylor, were getting caved in. And the running back was forced to make his cut a lot earlier than you'd want. And you think about this run game, you're like, hey, if I'm going to run the ball, who do I want to be my best players? Guard, center, guard. They have, three really good guys at those positions.
You could say it's the best interior offensive line in the NFL.
It is, right? And yet they could not run the ball at all last year. And a lot of it, like I said, they wanted to go more horizontal. They were getting caved in at the tackle position, and the running back had nowhere to go. So they, just like the Rams, said, you know what, let's go downhill. So they lead the league in counter runs this year. More inside zone. I think they're 28th so far this year in percentage of outside zone runs this year. And it really started in the playoff. When you look at their splits between the regular season last year and the playoffs, where they ran the ball a little bit better in the playoffs, was they were like, no, we're not going outside anymore. We're going to hit it downhill, power, counter. And that's really going to help us utilize these three great players we have in the middle. They've continued that this year. So I think the running game being much more efficient, again, just 2 games, is going to help them a lot. Again, they just need to figure out this passing attack, and it can't just be all on Mahomes all the time.
Yeah, and it feels like they're missing that intermediate receiver, right? When you think about some of the guys that they have, Rashee Rice is a really nice, like, hey, dump the ball off to him, let him be a great yards after catch guy. That's what he was last year. That's what he was this year. I know he caught, you can use Rashee Rice deeper down the field, but it feels like he's sort of that receiver where it's either like a screen or a slant or a crosser, or you're sending him deep. It's like a vertical route, something like that. Xavier Worthy, sort of the same way. Screen guy, wide receiver reverse, or we're sending him on a 9 route. When it comes to over the middle stuff, they don't really have an over the middle receiver. I think they were maybe hoping that like whatever Juju Smith-Schuster is left, like in his couple of stints with Kansas City, that like he could be that guy because he was sort of that guy when he was with Pittsburgh. And then obviously you feel like you don't necessarily have to deal with that because every broken play, when Mahomes, if the tackles don't block well, Mahomes got to get out of the pocket. We all say the same thing, right? Mahomes looking deep downfield, we all go, oh, here comes Kelsey wide open because he's great at it because he's a phenomenal intermediate wide receiver. But with Kelsey not necessarily having that athleticism anymore as much as he has in the past, just from listening to what you're saying, I'm thinking in my head, they're missing that element of the offense. Like I think of great, like over the middle wide receivers, like Chris Godwin's one that I've watched for plenty of years in Tampa Bay. I mean, when they have needed something over the middle, just an over route or a deep crosser or something in between the linebackers, in between the safeties, they go to him and he can make the tough catches for you in really, really tight targets. I don't really think the Kansas City Chiefs really have anybody outside of that. And so when I looked at 2 of the interceptions that Mahomes has thrown this year, both of them are over the middle. And both of them are linebackers undercutting exactly where they think the one intermediate option is going to be because with Kelsey, he's the only guy that they have in that area. And with the rest of the team playing deeper in coverage, Mahomes isn't looking deep. He's got to be able to push the ball somewhere. He tries to do it and squeeze it in between cover 2 over the middle, and the linebackers have just been able to step in front of it because they've been very ready for it, especially the interception that he threw over the middle against the Bengals, where I cannot remember which linebacker, might have been Jermaine Pratt, but who stepped in front of him. I mean, they are running to the cutoff point before the ball is even thrown. They know exactly where the ball was going, and the second that Mahomes even hinted that he was going to the middle, over the middle of the field, they were running towards it. So, to me, I agree with you on the run game part of things, but when it comes to like what the Chiefs can do, I think one of those receivers that they have has to be more of an intermediary option, or they're just going to be in a lot more slugfests, if you will, sort of like we saw this past weekend. That's what it feels like this season. Now, that doesn't mean they couldn't still win the division, still maybe even get the 1 seed. Like, obviously making the playoffs, the team's too good. The defense certainly is too good. But it's not like, I'm with you, it's not like the Mahomes of 3 or 4 years ago where the Chiefs are just beating everybody by 30 points. I don't think the team's built like that right now.
Yeah, I mean, and the first 2 weeks, like they're 2-0, but they've allowed some points. Like it's not the defense. I think the defense will figure it out. Like I really like this defense, but if they're not, like right now they're 25th in EPA per play. Again, it's 2 weeks, small sample size. The Chargers and Saints are number 1 and 2 in EPA per play. And guess who they got to play? Both teams who played the Panthers. So like it's still early in the season, so I think the defense will be good, but I think that gives me worried. It's like the defense isn't this top elite unit like it was last year, and the offense continues to be in the middle somewhere. Again, this offense is never going to be a bottom third offense because Patrick Mahomes too good.
Right.
But if it's in that 10 to 12 range, I get a little nervous.
Yeah. And maybe that's sort of, what we're talking about here. Maybe that's been the emphasis with adding tight ends, right? They draft Jared Wiley. They've got Noah Gray. Maybe they're really hoping that the tight ends could be more of those over the middle of the field type options for them because they kind of need it there.
They're in a weird world because they want teams to play with 3 linebackers on the field versus them. Teams will just won't do that. Like they would love to see, because so many teams are, you look at a lot of teams. The Lions last year, a great example. Lions last year had 2 tight ends by the name of Brock Wright and James Mitchell, I believe, who really did not grade out. They're just replacement level tight ends, maybe even below replacement level tight ends. Do not grade out well for us, except when they go on the field, the Lions got base defense and they got base coverages, and they had like a super high efficiency rate when they were in those 12 personnel, 13 personnel, stuff like that. The Chiefs, no one will ever play that much base against the Kansas City Chiefs. A lot of that is Kelsey, like that they don't feel like they need to. They don't feel like they should play a linebacker when Kelsey's on the field. So you get into these situations where, okay, you bring in Noah Gray, you bring in like Hendershot, who might get some run. They just traded for Wiley. like if Kelsey's on the field with one of those tight ends, it's nickel defense. It's 11 personnel for the defense. So they're not getting those opportunities to say, hey, we can simplify the game by playing in heavier personnel. Defense is not respecting that heavier personnel. So you got to live in, okay, well, we're back to these struggles that we had, and we can't find the easy buttons.
Interesting. Man, it's the Chiefs in particular are a very incredible chess match because, sort of like we said at the beginning of this conversation, the Chiefs will get everyone's best, right? Whatever somebody thinks like the cutting edge way is to play defense, the Chiefs will get it. They were the first team because, I mean, they're the champs now. They were the team to beat even 3-4 years ago. And so that's sort of where it started, and that's, I think, still where we are at is even every single week you get defensive coordinators who go, we're playing Kansas City Mahomes and Andy Reid this week. Like, we're going to throw everything at them to sort of like confuse them, and it feels like the Chiefs have yet to have that counter punch, which, look, if Chiefs fans are listening, you're 2-0, and you really have yet to hit that counter punch. So we'll see what their final record is and what they look like going into December and January.